Well, welcome to Culturally Appropriate Episode 5. This is our special Labor Day edition. The summer is almost over. I guess this is the last hurrah this weekend. So we have a really special treat for you today. First, we're going to talk to Geneva DeCobert and Lucas McEachern, who started a radio show slash podcast slash YouTube series called Super Sick Investigations. Geneva is also our producer, so she gets to run double duty today. Next, we are going to talk about my recent review in the Pamphleteer of Quentin Tarantino's Cinema Speculation. And last, we are going to go over a very heavy weekly film rundown. I think we have over 12 movies to get through today playing in the Nashville area. And I do want to mention that the Pamphleteer is the only place where you can find an exhaustive and complete list of every film that is playing and opening in Nashville every weekend. So head on over to the pamphleteer.co to see our weekly film rundown, which comes out in Friday's newsletter. So I'm going to introduce Geneva and Lucas right now, who are the creative team behind Super Sick Investigations. And I think they'll be popping up at any moment. Hey, Geneva. Usually when I see you around this time, it's because I'm doing something wrong. So it's kind of nice not to have that happen right now. So how are you two doing today?
Doing pretty well, having a good day. I did spend 2 hours this morning troubleshooting to try to play video games with my little brother in China, but we're going to try again tonight.
I can imagine that is a hefty time difference there. And Lucas, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well today. I just took a break from doing just some work from home drudgery to join you, so I'm really happy to be here. And thanks for having us.
Yeah, we all have second, third, fourth, fifth jobs in this gig economy for sure. So before we actually get started talking, do you all work remotely on this, since you mentioned remote work, or are you all located in the same area? I'm not going to dox you, Geneva, because I know.
Oh, no, that's okay. Lucas and I live together.
Oh!
We're roommates, yeah, in real life.
Yeah, it's just hard to stream. It's hard to do it from the same computer unless you get like a microphone splitter. I don't know, like audio issues and stuff.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's the illusion, right? So I didn't know that if that were the case or not. I didn't know if you all were working from across coast or something like that. So
no, we live together. A lot of our voice actors live in different places. We use Clean Feed usually to connect with all them, but for the first 3 episodes, we got everyone in a room together mostly, so that worked out nicely.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I mean it's such a special show. I basically binged it during my drive time this week, and yeah, getting up early, my 2-hour commute, it was kind of a surreal moment. So before we actually introduce the viewers to Super Sick Investigations, can you all tell me a little bit about your artistic background and sort of how you got to the point that you're doing this kind of revival of the old radio show in a new postmodern sort of way?
Lucas, you want to talk about your artistic history first?
Sure. I mean, it's not terribly extensive. I've always had an interest in acting and music, but I never really got it together in any sort of traditional academic capacity. So, I've mostly been goofing around in like friends' videos and stuff for a little bit. And in the past, I was in a band in Los Angeles called Panic in Eden. Actually, some of those guys that I was in a band with are still in a band in Nashville now. Called Karma Vulture, and they're good guys. So, since you asked, I couldn't, it's hard to avoid wanting to give them a little plug. But, this is probably, I don't know, this is the first time in a while that I really sat down to do something creative like this. And I appreciate Geneva for sort of pulling me into it.
Yeah, I've been doing music for a really long time, and, some sketch comedy, some live streams, by myself and with Internet 4000, which is our like comedy group that is the like production company of Super Sick Investigations.
Oh yeah.
We decided to do Super Sick because we have a lot of creative friends, and we were listening to the old Mighty Boosh radio play, and I was laying on the couch and I was like, man, I wish we were there. It would be so fun to just be with a bunch of cool people who you like and doing something creative like this that uses all of your talents, and make all the music and do everything. And then like there was like a beat and I was like, oh, we can do that. We can just do that. It doesn't take anything but lots and lots of time to make an audio play series.
Yeah. it's not as like financially restricting as other kinds of as other mediums,
Yeah,
and
like
even in
film or
terms of
animation.
physical labor, like I don't have to make a big paper mache set like
Yeah.
the Mighty Boosh guys eventually had to do when they made their TV series and things. Although we'll see, maybe I will have to make a paper mache
You
set.
might have
We'll
to make a big
see.
paper mache set. Yeah, so that's how we ended up doing an audio play series.
Great. So how did you two meet and begin your collaboration?
Funny story.
Yeah, we
We
met
were
on a Discord.
Yeah, we met on a Discord server, and then I didn't like the way it was moderated, so I made a second one and just took all the people I liked from it so we could hang out without those moderators. Um, and then we all ended up
So we
meeting
could be
up
bad.
so we could be bad. And then we all met up in the summer of 2020, actually. Well, like 9 of us flew in to our friend's house. And at the end of that long weekend, I turned to Lucas and I said, hey, do you want to live together in like a year? And he was like, yeah, we could. I mean, that's a ways away. We could talk about it. And a couple of months later, maybe like 6 months later, I was like, hey, do you want to live together in like by springtime? And we just got to work on it. And then we both moved where we are now.
So what brought you to
Right.
Tennessee specifically, since this is the pamphleteer local media? So I think
Yeah.
it's important to talk about what brought you to this region.
Well, I spent 2.5 years hitchhiking around the country, and I liked 3 areas the most. I liked Eastern Tennessee, I liked Western Montana, and Northern New Mexico. But when I was thinking about places to move, Western Montana and Northern New Mexico seemed way too close to California for my liking, basically. And I was like, okay, let's narrow this down. Let's not be too picky. I want to have a place where we're not paying more than a certain amount. I want there to be trees around everywhere, and I want to have an extra room to do like music in. And I put those things into different, house search apps and websites, and most of them were in this area anyway, in the southeast. I didn't really want to live in Georgia, didn't want to live in Virginia. I already loved Tennessee, so now we're here. I
Yeah.
regret nothing.
Yeah, not that dissimilar story on my end. I sort of became I don't know. I grew up in the Northeast. I grew up in Connecticut in sort of like a rural area, and I had been living with my parents for a while in Florida, and it was really I mean, Florida's gorgeous and everything like that, but I got super super homesick. But I really can't, for a bunch of reasons. I mean, this is also around like COVID and stuff, but like for certain for economic reasons, everything I it just didn't seem like feasible or like it made sense for me to try to return to Connecticut. Like I live in a house with like 7, and I didn't want to, I didn't have any family members to move in with up there, and that's pretty much what everyone up there is doing that was around my age. Geneva presented Tennessee to me, and we visited, and it was really gorgeous. And a big part of why it makes me happy is just sort of, it has trees I recognize. It's rolling hills. I really like driving on winding country roads. It just makes me happy.
The people are nice too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like that's something that's really happened since COVID is we have this sort of artistic migration. Nashville's always been that way, but the wider region too, because I know you're kind of in between like I am. You're not necessarily in the metro area, even though we both work for the Pamphleteer. So I've been noticing sort of this artistic renaissance that's been happening after some of those more draconian COVID policies kind of came in and drew people out, and the lockdowns and everything like that. So we've not started to talk about the actual show yet. I tried this week to explain this show to many people, and I failed miserably.
It's so hard to explain. I landed on a cartoon for your ears.
Mm-hmm. Or
like
you could go the other route and be like, well, like Orson Welles' War of the Worlds,
Yeah.
maybe, but it's episodic. It's a comedy. It's like Adventure Time kind of. It's like yeah, you could say like 7 or 8 things, but it's not. It's kind of hard to find like a touchstone. Like, oh, okay, I know what this is.
Yeah,
I know
you
what they're
gotta
going
just check
for.
it out to know what we're doing.
Yeah, I think maybe the best thing we could do is just go ahead and play. I know we've got a couple of clips lined up.
Yeah,
So
let me.
you want to just play a clip that will kind of introduce us to the show, and then after that, you can sort of explain the plot, for lack of a better word.
Yeah,
Cool.
absolutely. Let me doing. I love doing multiple things at once. Oh,
Whoa.
oh. Okay, got it. Kowloon wants to know, Lucas, if you got a tan in Florida.
I mostly just sort of peeled a lot of skin off. I became very red, like a boiled lobster. But if I'm honest, I spent a lot of time inside and then I'm out at nighttime. I find it. I'm very Scots Irish, and I found it the sun very inhospitable for much of the year.
All right, now I'll play this clip. Yes, this is from episode 2. Lucas tells me that Nephilim are real giants that used to populate the Americas, and we build
They
a
are.
giant house to make friends with one, and we do, and this is us having some fun with our new friend.
I think we're being censored, y'all.
So that's one clip from our show.
If you want to keep working on it while we're doing that, that's totally fine. Technology does not always work the way that we intended to do. So when I was thinking about how to describe the show to people, it's very surreal, and I said that it kind of melds the surrealist aesthetic in general of like old Louis Buñuel, Salvador Dali films, or it's got that Dada like quality as well. So like very early, post World War I modern art, but it also has the vibe of some of the early adult swim shows as well, like Sea Lab or Aqua Teen Hunger Force.
Thank you so much.
And kind of
Means a lot.
you've got this like DIY Scooby Doo aesthetic going on as well. I feel like so. I mean, when you were looking at the TV, or whenever you were looking at your various inspirations, like where did you draw from as you were making the show?
Right off the top, Aqua Teen Hunger Force is a huge inspiration on all of my entire sense of humor. I'd say like over 50% of the references that are stuck in my head are from Aqua Teen Hunger Force. It was my adolescence, my childhood. Adventure Time, as Lucas mentioned. And obviously the Mighty Boosh is a huge inspiration to us. You want to add anything, Luke?
Oh man, I mean, on top of those 3, it's sort of difficult off the top of my head, but I guess I would re-emphasize the Mighty Boosh. I thought that it was just one of the coolest things about that was kind of that it had it was high quality, but it also had sort of a punk DIY aesthetic. In reality, I'm sure the episodes of the TV show cost millions of dollars to produce, but they had a way of making it look effortless and continue like with the original idea, which is this is something that friends made, and this is something that was made for fun. And I hope that came through because it's sort of, I don't know, there's something very special about that.
Yeah, and I think it does absolutely come through. It's the DIY. There is this personal stamp on it that it's very much unfiltered. You don't have this corporate sort of overlord telling you what to do. The episodes can just kind of be zany and go. I never knew whenever I was listening to an episode like what the hell was going to actually be happening by the end of it, and I love that about the show. I laughed multiple times throughout it, and then I was always surprised by the ending of every single episode. So it's definitely, I think.
Me too. Sometimes Even as we're writing them, it was very surprising what we would settle on.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about your writing process. I mean, I guess if you all are living in the same house, it's probably pretty easy to find times to write. But like, what's the drafting process like? I mean, I've never done an audio play or kind of these throwback radio shows. I mean, I love them. I mean, listening to The Shadow from the 30s. One of the old AM stations when I was living in Knoxville used to play all of those on Sunday nights, like all the way the night through. So I love those old radio hours. I've got a couple of CD collections of various old radio shows, but then you're kind of mixing it with the everybody has a podcast sort of idea of today or model of today. You're still doing something distinct. I mean, you're really setting yourself apart. So what is the process like whenever you're getting the script down, whenever you're talking about these ideas, and how long does that take?
It usually starts with one goofy joke that one of us has.
Yeah.
There's just like, I don't know, your roommates, you live together, you're working in close quarters, getting out of cars together from, wherever. It usually, I don't want to say like, oh, it just comes from the ether, man. I don't know what to say. It just comes to me. It usually starts with one of us makes the other person laugh with a off color joke that only makes sense in an imaginary context.
Yeah.
And then you create the imaginary context around it.
Yeah. So I don't want to spoil the one we're working on now. It'll basically start with something like that. I could say episode 1 starts with the joke about the White House basement, and there's like disgusting noises everywhere, and one of us picks up a senator and is like, what's going on, and he's just going, oh, this is my favorite room. And so all of episode 1 was built around that joke. And after we come up with a joke like that, or like the idea for the episode, usually we'll have like a session where we just sit down and kind of like riff. We'll come up with like an outline, basically point A to B to C for the plot, certain jokes we want to slide in. Maybe like we'll come up with a line here or there we want to put in for sure. And then we take that outline another time. And it seems so far like every episode we've done is about 2-hour writing sessions where we write through a bunch of the script. We just hammer it out. We're like, okay, I'm tapped for the night. And then we do it a second time. And we've had a lot of guest writers do this with us. So we'll have someone get in a call on speakerphone or whatever while we go through it. Yeah. And they come in the fun with us.
Just keep writing as long as you're able to find things funny.
Yeah.
Turns out that when you're writing, 2 hours is about the limit for how long you can find yourself funny. But yeah, it's kind of a new experience for me too. I kind of slowed down on writing. I stopped doing creative writing in the middle of probably at the end of middle school or beginning of high school. So it's sort of nice. It's sort of nice tapping into those muscles again, atrophied though they may be. I know you've been doing a lot of writing, Geneva. I guess you never stopped.
I have so much writing I do all the time. Yeah. And that's another thing I wanted to mention earlier is Lucas and I were both, we were in theater in high school and we loved acting.
Don't tell everybody.
It's okay. It's because of the next thing I'm going to say.
Okay.
Which is that we couldn't stand theater kids, so we had to stop doing it. And we both stopped acting for a long time because we just couldn't deal with other theater people.
Yeah.
You all seen the movie Theater Camp yet?
No.
It's still playing in theaters, I think, but it was playing at Sidewalk when I was there last week in Birmingham, and then I think it's still at the Belcourt in Nashville. But as a former theater kid myself, it's pretty ruthless, and then it's a theater camp. Amy Sedaris is in it, so I don't know if y'all are strangers with Candy Fan. I mean, there's a little bit of that vibe going on with your show too. But
thank you, man.
You get sort of the mix of like younger theater kids who are just so full of drama, and then in addition to that, everyone else as well.
Don't.
Do we have a?
Sorry, we almost lost our connection there for a second.
Yeah, we almost lost our internet.
We're back. It was a close call.
I think the demon from like episode 5 might be visiting us. It seems like.
So. Oh yeah.
The internet's filled with them.
Yeah. So whenever you're in the middle of the writing process, like I've always heard, and I thought it's terrible advice. I mean, I never tell this to my students, but like the idea of sitting down and writing every day. Are you all proponents of that philosophy, or do you just kind of think about it constantly and sit down and kind of get everything out of the way in one binge session?
I write for work, and I still don't write every day. I'm much better. I have to like get myself to a state. Lately, I've been playing Tetris 99 in order to make my brain start going. And then when I'm done at the end of the day, I play Tetris 99 again to calm down. Lucas described it as like a mental midpoint of energy.
Yeah.
For me.
If you're too stimulated, it'll make you less stimulated mentally. But if you can't think of anything, then it'll force your brain to sort of turn over a few times.
Yeah.
Yeah. But speaking personally, I don't, when it comes to like creative stuff, and this is like especially true with music, like I've never been able to force writing. So I just have to, I guess maybe I need to find my own Tetris. I need to find sort of a state. Sometimes it'll be frantic, or sometimes it'll just be because I'm in a very goofy mood.
What did you do last night again? Because you were in a sour mood, and we were going to outline the Christmas episode.
Oh,
you did like a number of.
yeah, I was just having like total anhedonia. I hadn't slept very much the night before, and I just couldn't feel happy. And I'm like, I'm going to write a Christmas special for my comedy show, and I feel like I'm going to kill everyone. This is great. Fantastic then. But yeah, I didn't want to ruin the writing session, and Geneva was ready to go. So then I tried to just hedge my bets and put myself in the best mental state possible. I don't recommend this technique, but I dipped some tobacco and then like pounded a beer and ate a bunch of chocolate and candy, and then it worked actually. But try and access it within yourself. But that was that was extenuating circumstances. I just didn't want to blow it. Try and cultivate a life where you can feel good is better. Just to be
much
clear.
Better, ideally.
I've just always hated that advice. Go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, the reason I really wanted to get at it last night. Ordinarily, I would have been like, "Oh, okay, we'll put it off." But we had already done that like 3 times without lining the Christmas episode. So I was like, "Nah, come on, we can do it. We can do it tonight."
I feel like there's a fine line between procrastination, but what I really don't like about that, sit down and even if inspiration's not strike, go ahead and write it out, is that it kind of makes this artificial barrier between writing time and then just regular life where you get your ideas, which is always frustrating to me, because when I find myself, whether it's an article for the Pamphleteer, whether it's a film project, like hitting a wall, if I go watch a movie or I just go like take a walk in the park and think about it, I consider that the writing process. And sitting at a desk and just like trying to get through it doesn't work for me at all. And I think in some ways it can be very detrimental to creativity, because you're just drawing on everything and absorbing everything. And I don't really want to think about it as work. I want to think about it as like this thing I have to do, right? So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think when I'm writing alone, I do stuff like that, or I'll like purposefully put myself into this sort of psychotic state by like rolling around on my floor and talking to myself and saying
oh yeah, talking to yourself is really central. I think that's something that we have in common.
Yeah.
There's a lot of for me it's also, pacing.
Lucas is such a pacer.
Let your body do what it wants. Just let it.
But when we work together, you're making jokes with your best friend. I mean, that's great. Dramadina asks, how do you think Joe Biden affects all of this? I'm going to go ahead and say he doesn't at all.
Well,
he's pretty funny sometimes.
Where can I draw some inspiration? I don't know. I think that there's. I don't want to get too political.
Well, that does. I mean, that ties into one of my questions.
No, but I think that there's something to be said, at least in the comedy world. People say like he's not funny as previous presidents or something, but like I think there's something very comedic about sort of just going through and sort of being in trying to and put your energy, just sort of force your energy through into a situation. I don't know. I've enjoyed him from time to time
He's-
as someone who likes comedy.
He's more funny in like an Andy Kaufman way than a pro wrestler
Oh,
way.
imagine if it was an Andy Kaufman thing.
It'd
That'd be so.
amazing.
Oh my god.
Well, what's the conspiracy theory that it's like an actor in old man makeup and the actor's
Yeah.
like
Oh
30?
yeah, yeah.
Everyone
You're supposed to
thought
look
Trump
at
was
his
Andy
ears.
Kaufman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe it is Andy Kaufman. Who knows? But
There's
it does.
lots
It
of
does.
charts where they're talking. You got to compare the ear to nose ratio and things, and you can tell it's definitely actually it's one of the new rubber masks. They're really convincing.
So true.
Yeah.
Like the old man makeup in J. Edgar or something like that, where it's
Oh,
freaking,
what a
you
good
know,
one too.
that was one of my favorites. There's that scene of like Army Hammer in J. Edgar, if you've seen the movie, and it's just Clint Eastwood not caring about craft really and just trying to get through the movie, but like you can almost see where his like eye is detaching from the makeup.
Whoa.
Like
Oh my
writhing around
God.
on the floor. It's
I've
one of
got
my
to see
favorite.
it.
J.
Yeah,
Edgar, was that DiCaprio?
Yeah, and Army Hammer's is like
Gosh.
friend / secret lover, and he like has a heart attack and he's just like outside on like a bench going like, oh! It's like the funniest
Dude,
stuff
this
I've ever
sounds
seen
good.
in my life.
We gotta watch that.
I was
You
saying
really
we have to
should.
watch that movie.
Yeah,
you were
I mean,
saying
I
that.
like the movie. I have like a soft spot for that movie and Clint Eastwood in general, but I mean, it's maybe the best moment from the 2010s in film, just because it's
Gosh.
so self-serious and then just turns into this comedic thing. But that does bring me to another question, and that is, we are in kind of this weird political climate where what's supposed to be the counterculture is very much corporate, and Joe Biden is a great symbol of that. So, and conservative art, as we know, and we talk about on the show a lot, is it's just trash. There's really no other way to put it.
Totally.
You made
for
it
the
to
most
be
part.
conservative.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
I mean,
that's no fun.
I'm gonna make a point with my joke.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, like this is anti-woke, and that's why it exists. Or
Yeah.
the kind of shrill Ben Shapiro aesthetic, or the antics on Twitter. But
Yeah.
it seems to me there is this nice counterculture developing with and you all seem to have met in a very similar way to Dasha and Anna from Red Scare, and some of these people that I really do appreciate that are meeting over the internet and actually doing something that is pretty much skewering both sides. I mean, kind of the heirs to Trey Parker, Matt Stone from the '90s doing South Park.
Oh my God.
So I mean, like, what do you
sweet.
think is kind of motivating this art that is like very, I don't want to say nihilistic, because I don't think it's nihilistic. I mean, I feel like in some ways your show has this undercurrent of idealism, even though it's dealing with this nihilistic world. But
Thanks for noticing.
where do you see like actual indie aesthetic DIY art like you all, or the stuff that like Dasha and Anna are doing? I guess all of what we would call, for lack of a better word, like teal bucks, even though none of us are getting
Oh man.
really any money. But like where do you see actual art that's trying to push the envelope going as we move forward into this weird 2024, when the incumbent is too old to run and was too old to run 4 years ago, and we may or may not have a return to clown world with Trump? So like where do you see actual art in the vein of what you all are doing going here in the next like half decade? And I hope we didn't lose you, and I hope that we didn't offend the government, who are now choking our internet connection. But let's see. There we go. I think I hear you all.
I'm back.
Geneva not back?
Maybe not.
Oh,
Oh,
no.
no.
How did we lose Geneva and not you? Did you hear my question?
So could you repeat I'm sorry, could you repeat the second half of the question? I'd sort of
I
I'm
can.
not sure exactly where we left off, but sure. I'll
Yeah,
do my
hopefully Geneva will come back in.
Woo!
There
Here
she
we go.
is.
Welcome
All
back.
right. Great. Yeah, so we're in this sort of clown world, as everybody would call it on Twitter, and the artists that are supposed to be doing things are not, and it's sort of become this corporate symbolic of Joe Biden, right? It's like it's left, it's supposed to be pushing the envelope, but it's like artistically hollow, and then the right doesn't make good art, with very few exceptions. So
Right.
where do you see
Right.
people like you, or like Dasha Nekrasova making The Scary of 61st and doing Red Scare with Anna Kashian? What do you see happening with kind of this burgeoning, I don't want to call it new right, I don't want to put labels on it, but you know, the kind of stuff we would have expected from Spin Magazine, Rolling Stone culture in the 90s that has kind of been erased in favor of this like company man aesthetic. Like 5 years from now, where do you see this kind of art that you're, I guess, part of the movement of going?
So I'm not very, I wouldn't put myself up as like a political kind of analyst or anything like that, but I think that it's very good and very helpful that we're seeing sort of, I don't want to parallel media, parallel institutions are sort of cropping up because people don't want, I don't know, what's the alternative? It's like very, very much a monoculture otherwise. And I don't know if it always was like that. It seemed like there were a lot of ideas or ways of presenting yourself that were available in whatever media, and you'd sort of pick your favorite. As they're slowly becoming sort of outlawed on the main channels, I think that you're seeing lots of weirdo independent stuff crop up, and I like that a lot.
Yeah.
And it makes me happy to maybe be considered adjacent to that.
Yeah, it's very nice to be considered adjacent to that.
Yeah, I'm not a big expert on like the red scare people, although I certainly know of them. But if that's what they're doing, then good on them.
Yeah, I mean, they've been able to monetize really well. It's like they make 55 grand on Patreon, which
That's
I think
crazy.
is something else that I didn't ask about in my questions for the show prep. But and there is this idea, and it's the age old idea of being able to make a living at this. But especially now, there's kind of this current of, oh, our mass culture is hip to the times. Like we want this stuff that is envelope pushing and progressive, but they don't actually want the real envelope pushing progressive stuff. So, I mean, do you find it's harder to make a profit at this stuff and kind of turn it from a hobby into a career in this media landscape? Or would you have rather been like in the 90s aesthetic where, people were just actively seeking these offbeat projects?
Oh, man.
I hope people are seeking this because I want more people to see it. I'm really proud of what we've done. We don't make any money from Super Sick Investigations. We don't have that kind of fan base. It would be great if more people noticed it. It's hard to get people to find things when, we're also inundated with media and information all the time. But I don't know if people loved our show enough to that we could monetize it, I would absolutely love to, but it would not be at the sacrifice of its ethos at all.
Yeah. I don't have any experience making money from art. I kind of wish I went into it, like I like music from like the 60s and 70s, and I thought that it was going to be like I'm in the trogs or whatever, and then I put out a single, and then someone gives me $70,000 because a bunch of kids in Kansas City really thought it was an awesome song and played it in all the nightclubs or something. I thought that it was, I don't know, I never made the effort to understand the business side of entertainment for many years, even when I was trying to do music. I just thought that I'm showing up at a club and I'm playing a show every other day. Why aren't I rich yet? What's going on? We're really good. What happened? Yeah, no, you got to market yourself. And
we're not marketers.
No, I'm not. Working on it.
We can write, we can act, we can do music.
I just want to play around with my friends. I don't understand why I'm not rich yet. Damn it. Yeah.
So do you think we're going to be able to watch a clip, or would you all like to try to summarize the show, which I know is a tall order?
Oh, did the sound not play on the last
clip?
No,
audio didn't come through on mine.
You got no audio on the last one.
Let's see. You guys.
Not, we can wing it and just talk really quickly before we break for the next segment. But I'd love to be able to, at least
play a clip.
We can't hear it, then to at least sort of give people a rundown of what to expect as much as we can, which I know is impossible. So
I think the core, other than being like trying to be a heartwarming tale of friendship and overcoming the evils of this world, I think that the show really has a heavy emphasis on conspiracy theories, real or imagined. I think that's a real serious key. There's a little bit of like video game culture and like the way we grew up sort of communally enjoying fantastical worlds around like I don't know, around a PlayStation 2 or whatever. I don't know. There's like a nostalgia thing, definitely like kids that came up in the 2000s. But it's and even, it's kind of rooted in sort of the media that I was enjoying around that times. But I
Yeah,
don't
but
know.
it's
Would
not
you
like
like anything?
it's not crappy nostalgia like Stranger Things, though. I mean, it's
No.
not like, wow, Nightmare on Elm Street was a thing that was really
Yeah.
important to me as a child. Like you're actually doing something with the nostalgia. I mean, I would say it's almost anti-nostalgia in
Like,
some.
remember Lion-O and Sword of Omens? Give me sight beyond sight. Remember that? Yeah, we wanted to do it different than that, than just
Yeah, we
like
didn't.
saying the thing.
We didn't want to do. Yeah, it's we just like took stuff. The whole thing we did for fun. We knew we weren't making money here. We didn't know if a bunch of people would like it, although I think like the first episode has like 500 and something total plays or downloads now, which is nice. We just wanted to do something that we were proud of, that we could make the music for, that we could make all the jokes for with our friends. And yeah, I guess the vibe is two stupid versions of ourselves encounter various conspiracy theories, cryptids, and sort of fantastical situations, and don't react in a way that helps us generally ever, but things seem to work out.
Yeah. We
So
live in the world. We live in the world that people imagine Alex Jones thinks that the world is.
yeah.
It's their idea of what Alex Jones' lived reality might be.
I might be able to play a clip here.
Yeah, let's see if we
It looks
can.
like Davis is saying, try sharing instead of YouTube. So I'm gonna try that.
I would like to leave people, but I will say, like, you can pretty much binge it. I did it in a 2.5 hour commute and got through all the episodes, and it was a joy kind of experiencing it that way. So
Yeah,
it isn't something that's like you've got 500 episodes deep you've got to catch up on.
yeah. It's just when you don't have to be listening to someone else talking, why not listen to this?
It's nice.
Sick
Yeah,
of music. Music,
see if-
bleh, boring, except for ours.
And I love the music too. I mean, it's got this great. I told Geneva last night that it's kind of like a mix of Joanna Newsom and like the Pixies or the Breeders, and
Oh
it's
wow!
nice. Yeah, I mean, the theme song has been stuck in my head. So let's see if this will work, and if not, we'll just blame it on conspiracies.
Yeah. Good.
I'm not hearing it.
No, me neither.
The machine elves got you.
Well, I will put a link in my Twitter. Is there anything else you all want to add that we didn't get to cover? And where can we find the show, I guess, is also a really important thing to talk about.
Yeah, you can find the show on YouTube at INT4K. There will be a link in the description of this video. And it's also on a bunch of podcast platforms, which you can get to from supersick.podbean.com. Also in the links underneath this video. And we're working on a Christmas episode, working on a Christmas special for this year. We'd like to have it animated. So if any of you guys know any animators that are good, reach on out.
I do. I've got somebody in mind. I was with at the film festival showing one of our pieces last week. So I'll get that to you after the show.
Thank
but
you.
Geneva and Lucas, thank you all so much for joining us. This was a great conversation, and sorry for the Alex Jones conspiracy interventions that prevented us from hearing your work.
Oh, it's all right. They don't want to hear the truth these days, but we're still gonna stay strong.
We're gonna find the truth no matter what,
That's
and
right.
always tell it too.
Oh, the X-Files is enduring for sure. So, all right, I'll hope to see you both soon. And Geneva, you're, I guess, going to go back to backstage. So,
goodbye, everyone.
All right.
Thanks so much for having us.
No, of course, it was a pleasure. It was a pleasure. No. All right, so our next segment is going to be a discussion of Quentin Tarantino's new-ish book, Cinema Speculation. My review of this book came out earlier this week in the Pamphleteer, and I think we have a visual of that article from the show. So I don't know if any of you have actually read this book, but for me, as somebody who teaches film, as someone who writes about film, and as somebody who makes films, it was a joy. It was a revelation. I wouldn't expect anything less of Quentin Tarantino. It's been about 4 years since Tarantino made his last movie, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and to be quite honest, I don't think any movie released since then, with the exception of maybe Barbie, has really met the level of that movie. It's kind of like the last great Hollywood movie that came out before Oppenheimer or Barbie. And, in some ways it's, I think, Tarantino's best work, but, he's famously kept himself very busy over the last few years because he's always said that after 10 films, he plans to retire. And his new film, The Movie Critic, is supposed to be in development. I don't know how that really is going because of the writer's strike and the actor's strike. I do know that Tarantino is famously also not a member of the Writers Guild of America and hasn't been since he did not receive the proper credit for Oliver Stone's Natural Born Killers, which he really wrote the screenplay for before it was kind of, according to him, butchered or doctored or whatever you want to say. But Tarantino has been hosting what's called the Video Archives podcast with his Pulp Fiction co-writer Roger Avery. We did an interview with Roger's daughter Gulla Avery, who is the producer of Video Archives, back in March for our VHS Revolution article. And that podcast is basically Tarantino essentially going back through the video store where he worked at whenever he was first starting out. So Tarantino got to start working out of a video store called Video Archives. And as the industry changed and video stores started closing, he was at a point in his career where he basically bought the whole store and put it in his basement or a wing of his house and recreated it exactly. So every week on the show, he and Roger Avery, who work together, they go through and watch videos from the store that are still cataloged at Tarantino's house. It's one of my favorite podcasts in the world to listen to. I mean, I've listened to every episode, so I would highly recommend it. But in addition to Video Archives, which has been running for about a year now, Tarantino has been writing books. He wrote a novelization of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood back in 2021, and even a script for the fictitious show Bounty Law, which Leonardo DiCaprio's Rick Dalton in the movie stars in. So if you bought the hardcover version of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, you would get this cool script as an addendum. But he also wrote his first book of nonfiction film criticism. And as I said, this book is amazing. I talk about it in my review at length, but what's so great about this book is that Tarantino is kind of the only person who could write it. So he grew up watching these movies from the 1970s, and the book basically focuses on what's known as the American film Renaissance, which is the period from 1968 to 1975 when the movies changed. Bonnie and Clyde and The Graduate came out, and Hollywood was kind of falling apart because the studio era was essentially over, and studios were giving a little bit of money and full artistic control to directors like Dennis Hopper. And you would get these movies like Easy Rider, which cost $500,000 and grossed in the millions, and it reinvigorated Hollywood. And you got these great movies like The Godfather, The Exorcist, The French Connection, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and then Jaws was kind of the pinnacle. And after that, we kind of got in the blockbuster era. So Tarantino revisits this period, having seen these movies as a child and having them be very formidable in his film education. And he talks about that. So the book is part memoir. The book is also somebody documenting their encyclopedic knowledge of film, and not just film, but all of the other books about the period, like Mark Harris's Pictures at a Revolution or Peter Biskin's Easy Rider's Raging Bulls. So Tarantino's integrating himself into this academic argument. And his writing is not stuffy. It's not boring academic because it's melding film criticism, film academic research, memoir, and on top of all of that, journalism, because he's interviewing people that he's actually worked with or that were his heroes. One of my favorite parts of the book that I talk about in the review is throughout the book, he is very honest about Paul Schrader, who just made the movie Master Gardener, but also most recently made The Card Counter with Oscar Isaac and First Reformed with Ethan Hawke, where he was nominated for an Oscar for the screenplay for that particular film. But, he talks about Schrader as a great writer, but somebody who can't write genre movies. And part of the book features his movie Hardcore that Schrader directed at the turn from the 70s to the 80s, which Tarantino has a problem with. And he talks about his problem with it, but then because he's Quentin Tarantino, he's able to call up Paul Schrader. and see why this ending of the movie happened the way that it did. And he wasn't satisfied. So he calls up John Milius, who, if you know the political commentator and documentarian Amanda Milius, her father is John Milius. John Milius wrote Apocalypse Now, famously Dirty Harry, and made Red Dawn, which is kind of a conservative classic, as well as some other great movies like Dillinger with Warren Oates. But he interviews these people that were on the front lines of the creative class during the American film Renaissance and gets their perspective. So this is a book that really kind of reframes what we think of as film criticism, both popular and academic. And it's amazing for that reason. So Tarantino's central argument in the book is that essentially what we think of as the film Renaissance is not really the film Renaissance. You have these auteur directors who are counterculture, and then you have what's called the movie brats. And the way Tarantino divides it up is people who don't like Hollywood movies, who spent their careers trying to like deconstruct them or criticize them. So he would put somebody like Dennis Hopper in this category. He would put somebody like John Cassavetes in this category. And then he has the movie brats, people like Francis Ford Coppola, Martin Scorsese, Steven Spielberg, George Lucas, who love Hollywood movies. Tarantino would put himself in that category as well, even though he came about 2 decades later into prominence. And the argument is that these forces were actually working against each other. So it wasn't this monolithic counterculture that took over Hollywood. It was people who were viewing Hollywood's past in 2 distinct perspectives, or from 2 distinct perspectives, which is very interesting for today whenever we're talking about all of these various culture war elements that, I personally don't think exist. So I wanted to read a couple of passages just to show you what Tarantino was doing differently than other critics. Most critics now are looking back at movies and saying, this is problematic, blah, 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 or something like that. Tarantino's not doing that. So one of the passages that I really appreciate in the book is Tarantino talking about the movie Deliverance, which, if you know the history of that, you've probably seen the t-shirts that say, if you hear banjos, keep paddling. Deliverance is a movie that's shot outside of Atlanta, famous for the rape scene of Ned Beatty. You sure you got a pretty mouth. That's a movie that's been considered as Appalachian stereotypes for the longest time, but it's always been more complicated than that, even though cultural critics try to essentially distill it into just a stereotype of a film. Tarantino, because he is from the South, he was born in Knoxville, was there before he was in LA, moved back to the Oak Ridge area very briefly whenever he was in his preteen years. So Tarantino is very familiar with this region. And he talks a little bit about Burt Reynolds' character, Lewis, in Deliverance, if you've seen that movie, and how Lewis is a very different version of the South and a very different presentation of the South than what others would think of it. So, you have these people from the West Coast saying, oh, this is a movie that stereotypes the South. Tarantino knows better. And he describes Lewis like this. Yet author James Dickey, who wrote Deliverance, the novel that the movie is based off of, and the movie makes it clear Lewis is trying to live up to an idea of himself. He's not full of shit, but he's also not the authority he tries to come across as. The way he bluffs the hillbillies over the price of driving their cars downriver is how he bluffs his buddies about his one-with-nature mountain men shtick. He's full of consumed facts rather than experience-derived wisdom. He is quite a good bow hunter, but he's a sportsman, not a survivalist. More balls than brains, more opinion than knowledge. Yes, he possesses more instinct than his 3 companions, but even his instinct, like his whole macho projection of self, is a pose. And going on down, he says, his cigars are Cohibas, not Dutch masters. He knows how to order a Brandy Alexander and a Harvey Wallbanger and how they're supposed to taste. Lewis has seen Jack Nicholson in 5 Easy Pieces. Lewis knows who Roman Polanski is. This makes sense when you realize that Lewis is a stand-in for the author James Dickey, who in actuality isn't a Tarzan, but a poet. So obviously we would expect Quentin Tarantino to be able to write very, very well based on his movies, but the way that he sort of takes down this idea of Deliverance as a monolithic version of the South is something that scholars aren't even doing who study this. Now, in our current climate, what passes for cultural criticism is labeling something problematic or racist and moving on from there and saying how we should never look at it again, or getting clicks or getting attention by taking on one of these classic movies. I mentioned Dirty Harry a lot in my own writing, but Tarantino does an amazing analysis of Dirty Harry as well in this vein. Also, he talks about Taxi Driver as well, and I wanted to read a passage from that particular portion. Taxi Driver is also a movie that has come under a lot of fire. It's kind of getting re-looked at and reassessed because, it focuses on a white male who is deranged. And, we have a very different view of that in our common culture than we might have in the past. So Tarantino asks a question in the book. Is this movie Taxi Driver a movie about a racist, or is it a racist movie? The answer is clearly the former. And what makes the film a gutsy masterpiece is it dares to pose that question to the audience and then allows them to devise their own answer. In the years since he wrote the screenplay, Paul Schrader has articulated that Travis's racism stems from the fact that the frustrated and powerless poor tend to take out their resentment not on the powerful class above them, but the even more powerless class below them. And while in a larger and more political context, that is true, that's not the most important reason that Schrader made Travis a racist. The real reason for Travis's antagonism towards black folks is because it matches Ethan Edwards' hatred of the Comanches and John Ford's The Searchers. Yet as rough as Scorsese's picture is, it's still a watered-down version of Schrader's original nihilistic text. So we know why Tarantino's movies are so good, and it's because he's able to think in this way that defies wisdom, and he's also able to look at movies from the perspective of actually knowing their history, which is something that most filmmakers today have no idea how to do. It's one of the reasons that, with the exception of Greta Gerwig, millennials have never been able to reach the heights of Gen X. I've written about this in the pamphleteer before, that the heroes of the American cinema, the greatest artists of the American cinema, are still the same artists that have been making movies for 2 decades, like Tarantino or Wes Anderson. Again, with the exception of Gerwig, we don't really have anybody in the millennial generation that is making anything close to the kind of art that these artists are, that Tarantino is representative of. So I would highly recommend reading Cinema Speculation. I am just sad that it took me this long to actually be able to review it. It is available in bookstores everywhere, and read it. It will change the way that you view movies, I promise you. One of the best books of film criticism ever written. We're so lucky to have Quentin Tarantino as an artist, and it's going to be a tragedy when he retires. So check out the book, check out the Video Archives podcast, and that's what I have to say about Quentin Tarantino's book. So the last thing we're going to talk about today, as usual, is the weekly film rundown. And this week was a slog, I'm going to be honest. The pamphleteer, again, is one of the only, really the only source in Nashville where someone can look up every single movie that opens in a given week. Unfortunately, this week we have over a dozen movies opening, and I really can't say that there are that many that I would recommend checking out. I'm going to give you my picks. The biggest movie opening this week, and one that's come as quite of a surprise because it's gotten very, very good reviews, is The Equalizer 3, which I think we have a trailer for. For those of you that have been following the Equalizer franchise over the past 10 years, Denzel Washington plays America's favorite vigilante. This is based on the TV series. And in this instance, he's moved to a remote Italian village, and he's ready to roll with his life. He's getting out of the violence game, but the mafia comes in. And for some reason, Dakota Fanning does too, as an idealistic journalist. And Denzel Washington has to go back for one last hurrah. So this, to me, is really the perfect ending for the summer. This is the last big opening of the summer movie season. Next week, we get The Nun 2, which traditionally is the first weekend in September, kicks off the fall movie season, which is all Oscar bait and horror movies. But I am looking forward to seeing The Equalizer 3. I've liked the other installments. I've not loved them, but from all accounts, this one is going to be a great way to spend the last weekend of the summer. The other film that is opening that I would highly recommend this week, that I've actually seen already thanks to my trip to the Sidewalk Film Festival last week, is Bottoms. This movie is, you're going to see a lot of articles about this movie, and I think there was one in the Nashville scene this week about how, this is the representation movie for teen lesbians. The teen lesbians are finally getting their own story. I think that's a great disservice to the movie. Yes, this is a movie about two misfit lesbians played by Rachel Sennett and Ayo Edebiri, who start an all-girls fight club in order to try to score with cheerleaders. But the movie is incredibly subversive. I call it in my rundown this week the most anti-PC comedy hand grenade since Pineapple Express. The movie's dark. It kind of goes there and making fun of Me Too and contemporary feminism, while also presenting its characters as three-dimensional and human. It's not an identity politics-based movie. It goes much deeper. So I would recommend checking out Bottoms, even if you're kind of sick of all of this diversity and inclusion rhetoric that we're seeing today, and you've been burned by a lot of the movies that people are critically lauding. I think this movie more than deserves its critic score and audience score. And you can see that because we have 95% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes, and the audience loves it as well, which a lot of times that's not the case. So I think this is a great crowd pleaser, and I would highly recommend this one. One movie I haven't seen that I'm very much looking forward to if I can catch it, because it's playing very limited release, is Beaten to Death. This is an Australian horror movie, or what's commonly known as Ozploitation. And it's got a very simple premise. A good dude claws his way through the outback and outwits backwater psychos. This is made by Welcome Villain Films, or distributed by them. And if you remember earlier this year, I wrote an essay about the movie Hunt Her Killer, which was made in Morristown for a little bit of money with a 3-person crew. Really great, nasty, brass tacks horror film. So Welcome Villain, over the past couple of months, has been releasing these very low budget, yet very high quality, unique horror movies. And I've not been disappointed. Hunter Killer I thought was great. I enjoyed the movie Malcolm for the most part as well, which they released last April. So I'm looking forward to having this one take up some time on my weekend schedule. We also have a couple of other films opening. A movie called Don't Look Away, which is another low-budget horror. I've not been able to find much about the movie, but the trailer is very nicely cut, and I think it would definitely be a nice night out at the movies. We also have the movie Kushi opening, which is a Telugu Indian film. And I say this all the time, I would highly recommend, if you haven't seen a Bollywood movie or a movie from the Indian film industry, to check one out at AMC Thoroughbred 20 or Regal Hollywood 27, which are the basic distribution arms, the basic theaters here in Nashville that actually play those types of movies. So I would recommend seeing one of those. Our last kind of biggest release this week is The Good Mother, which Hilary Swank, trying to get another Oscar nomination and sort of failing desperately at it, plays a journalist who is trying to investigate the death of her estranged son and ends up getting caught up in this drug underworld. I've kind of been over Hilary Swank since $1 Million Baby. I think all she does is make Oscar bait. She is a very talented actress. If you've seen the movie The Hunt, which I talk about in my There Is No Culture War piece, that's one of the performances that really does show how talented she is. But I just get tired of these self-serious, awful Oscar baiting movies. I don't know how they actually get made. I don't know who's seeing them. So I would definitely recommend skipping that one. We have a couple of other films opening as well. We have some documentaries at the Belcourt. Lakota Nation versus the United States, which I don't have a trailer for, but it is a searing and timely portrait of resistance about Native Americans fighting stereotypes and their efforts to reclaim the Black Hills of South Dakota and destroy Mount Rushmore, I guess. The movie to me just seems like it's going to be terrible. It's the kind of movie that people who really like Ben and Jerry's and white liberal privilege are going to love. Before seeing it, I know no one in our audience is going to see this movie, and they probably shouldn't. I would recommend reading Jeff Finn Paul's piece in The Hill about the actual truth behind the Lakota Nation and how they really were involved in land seizure and colonialism before the white man got there. He's got a new book coming out that really does challenge some of these stereotypes, and I'm sure it's going to cause controversy. So this is another one of those garbage Sundance movies. I'm probably going to look at it because I try to watch everything. I try to actually live out cultural dialogue if I can, but I will take the bullet for you on that one. One movie I'm also excited about is Umberto Eco's Library of the World, which is a documentary that follows the great novelist Umberto Eco on a personal tour through his library. He has passed away since this movie was made, but he has 50,000 books in his library, and this movie seems really great. I'm going to take a look at that one. So these are basically the films that are released this week. There's so much. We can go through all of them if you go to the full film rundown. The last thing I probably should mention this week is the Taylor Swift Eras Tour, which I think we may have a link to. Taylor Swift, surprisingly yesterday, announced that a film version of her Eras Tour that has made so much money over this past year will be coming for a 4-week engagement in October. And the really cool thing about the Eras Tour movie, whether you like Taylor Swift or not, is AMC Theaters is actually distributing it. And the article that I linked to, that should hopefully be popping up on your screen at some point soon, is about how AMC brokered this deal as kind of a warning shot to the studios for canceling movies in the last quarter of this year because of the writer's strike and the actor's strike, to basically say, we don't need you. You don't dictate the terms anymore. So this movie is obviously going to be, when it comes out in the middle of October, a cultural touchstone, but I think it's going to be as important for the business side of things as it is for Taylor Swift. This IndieWire article is great. I loved it. It really goes into detail about Adam Aron, the CEO of AMC, and how this movie is kind of going to be charting forward a new path for movie theater. So I already have my tickets to see this in October. I am an unashamed Swiftie, so I will be checking it out for sure. So that is our show today. Thank you all for following me along with that lengthy film rundown. I will see you next week. So have a happy Labor Day, and whatever you do this weekend, give it some thought. Signing off.